It was one of the most publicized captures in history. Covered him in a blanket and paraded him before the world's cameras. He looked more like an accountant than the infamous leader of a nation. All they knew was that they had caught Saddam Hussein. But it would be the last page in Saddam's storybook. 8 months after being captured, Saddam was led to the gallows. He was given the option of choosing a blindfold. We've brought you stories of some of the most dangerous dictators throughout history, from Mao Zedong to Joseph Stalin. Decades in power. If you were alive during the 1980s and 90s, you would have heard of the notorious leader of Iraq. How could you not? His name was synonymous with brutality, cruelty, and war. While much of the world feared him, there were others who admired his strength and audacity, largely because he presented himself as a champion of the Arab world against Western oppression. When Saddam took charge, he immediately began to work towards making the country stable. Most importantly, Saddam promised to make Iraq a powerful player on the global stage. Within no time, he had the backing of the masses. However, his methods were far from ethical. He launched a genocidal campaign against Kurds in northern Iraq. He waged a brutal war against Iran. That was until he decided to invade Kuwait. The United Nations Security Council demanded that Iraq withdraw from Kuwait immediately. But before the operation commenced, Saddam declared that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and threatened to use them. This only strengthened the resolve of the coalition. On February 24, 1991, American troops crossed into Saudi Arabia. 2 days later, they entered Kuwait. Over the next 2 decades, he defied the UN and the West, built weapons of mass destruction, and plotted attacks against the U.S. Finally, the U.S. invaded Iraq again. The hunt begins. For the first few weeks after the U.S. invasion, Saddam was everywhere and nowhere. At one point, reports said he had been killed. Then they said he was spotted in Mosul. What was true was that Saddam was on the run, desperately trying to evade capture. Saddam knew that if they got their hands on him, he wouldn't live to see another day. So he went into hiding, disappearing from public view. And the longer he stayed hidden, the more the legend of his invincibility grew. But little did the world know, he wasn't as elusive as he appeared. People who once hailed him as a great leader now hurled abuses and threw stones at him. On December 13, 2003, Saddam's eldest son Uday was killed in a shootout with U.S. forces near Mosul. But he couldn't afford to grieve. Not only was his empire crumbling around him, his enemies were closing in fast. And he knew that his own end was drawing near. Final days after staying on the run for 8 long months, Saddam was ready to give up. He'd become weak and depressed. Several of his close aides had already been captured. Also, he was running out of options. On December 12, 2003, he sent a letter to the Red Cross asking for help. Through the Red Cross, he tried to contact Shiite cleric Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, hoping to broker a deal. But by this time, Shiites held immense influence in Iraq, and they wanted nothing less than Saddam's execution. Al-Sistani rejected Saddam's request. That's when Saddam made the decision to surrender. He was tired of living in fear. He was tired of hiding in the shadows. He wanted it all to end. On December 13, 2003, clad in a black shirt, black trousers, and a dark blue jacket, Saddam left his underground lair. He walked into the arms of U.S. soldiers waiting for him outside. To this day, the question remains, how did the Americans find him? Turns out it was one of Saddam's trusted aides who betrayed him. His name was Abed Hamed al-Jabari. He was one of Saddam's body double. For years, he had fooled the Americans by pretending to be the dictator. He even attended meetings on Saddam's behalf. But in the end, he spilled the beans. Jabari told the Americans where Saddam was hiding, expecting that they would spare him. He must have thought he could bargain with the Americans with the information he had, but they wasted no time. Jabari was also executed along with Saddam. The final hour since Saddam was in U.S. custody. He was taken to a secret location for interrogation. American officials knew that Saddam's life was in danger. With hundreds of thousands of Iraqis hating him, they couldn't risk holding him in an Iraqi jail, so they flew him to a U.S. military base in the Persian Gulf nation of Qatar. But the Americans had no intention of keeping him alive. They had a lot of questions for the dictator. Questions about his weapons program, his role in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, and his plans for the future of Iraq. But Saddam played dumb. He neither confirmed nor denied the allegations. He invoked the Geneva Convention, saying that as a prisoner of war, he did not have to talk to his captors. Frustrated, the Americans resorted to psychological torture. They kept him awake for days and deprived him of food and water. Of course, they never admitted to torturing Saddam, but what happened next proves that it was true. One night, a U.S. soldier entered Saddam's cell to check on him. He found the dictator kneeling on the floor. Saddam was in pain. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. His entire body was aching. The soldier assumed that Saddam had hurt himself. He rushed him to the base hospital, but doctors failed to find anything wrong with him. What happened next shocked everyone. In the middle of the night, Saddam went into convulsions. He was foaming at the mouth and his body jerked violently. Clearly something was wrong. He was taken to the intensive care unit where he was put on life support. It was obvious that Saddam Hussein had been tortured. Reports say the Americans pumped him full of drugs to extract information. It seems they pushed him beyond his breaking point. The fall of Ajantan, the early hours of December 2006, Saddam was transferred to a prison in Baghdad. This was the darkest chapter of his life. The former dictator who had ruled Iraq with an iron fist was now nothing but a broken shell of himself. On December 30, 2003, he was charged with crimes against humanity. The charges stemmed from the 1982 massacre of 180 Kurds, in which he was found guilty. The trial was widely publicized. Every day there were reports of Saddam cursing the Iraqi judges and shouting at his lawyers. Sometimes he would go on hunger strike for days together. Eventually, the court found him guilty and sentenced him to death by hanging. It didn't take long to carry out the sentence. That same evening, Saddam was hanged in a secret ceremony. The news broke the next morning. Saddam Hussein was dead. He was 66. What do you think about Saddam's end? Did he get justice, or was he simply eliminated? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed watching this episode, don't forget to subscribe.